I remember a few years ago, my mum, in a drunken rage, one of many that occurred, told my sister and I that she didn't love us, that she regretted having us, and that she would be so much happier and even wealthier if she hadn't have given birth to my sister and I. Now, this was shattering for me to hear, and as a result of that, it created this sense of not being good enough, not being lovable, and just honestly being a waste, a burden on the people around me. And that started to bleed through my romantic relationship that I was in at the time. I was afraid she would leave me. I was afraid I wasn't good enough. And ultimately, I honestly wanted to break up with her so that I could save myself the heartache and save her the heartache. And I even got to a point where I just didn't want to live anymore. I was genuinely considering a way to escape from life because I just felt if my own mother doesn't love me and if I've made her life this much worse, then I don't really need to be here. Now, the reason that I experienced that, and the reason that you probably have different internal conflicts, like perfectionism, wanting to achieve certain goals, but having conflicting desires that pull you away from them, like trying to achieve a great body, but then having bad habits around eating and drinking that come back up, or wanting to get into a romantic relationship or have a healthy romantic relationship, but having fears of commitment or trust issues and jealousy and things of that nature that pop up that sabotage your ability to achieve these goals. Now, the reason that we all have these issues and we have them in different ways is because we all have multiple personalities or sub-personalities that exist within us that each have a life of their own, thoughts of their own, beliefs of their own, and personalities of their own. And it's through being able to understand these personalities, which I'll explain to you how to do in this video, that you're going to be able to overcome the internal conflict in yourself and ultimately be able to understand the struggles that you have at a deeper level so that you can separate yourself from your fears, from your insecurities, from your feelings of inadequacy, from your shame, from your self-doubt, and everything in between, because you are not these personalities, okay? And I'm gonna teach you in this video how to separate from these personalities and from these fears and emotions and thoughts so that you can get back to the more powerful version of yourself, which is already inherent within you. Now, what I want to run you through here is that you, again, as I said, are separate from these personalities. So you are not your thoughts and feelings. You are actually the awareness that has these sub-personalities held within it. And these sub-personalities are different parts of us, as Richard Schwartz, who is the creator of the internal family systems model, which is where this whole theory comes from, actually has described them, okay? So these sub-personalities or parts are really parts of ourselves that are trapped in the past and serve different purposes to help either one, protect the past parts of ourselves that were hurt. So maybe when you were younger, you were bullied at school like I was, and that gave you a feeling of insecurity. Or maybe you, for example, had your heart broken or you were cheated on and that made you feel like you weren't good enough. Maybe you were embarrassed at school and now you have social anxiety and shame of public speaking and a fear of public speaking. Or maybe like me, you had issues with your parents and your parents made you feel like you weren't lovable, like you weren't appreciated, like you were a burden in their lives. And that is manifesting itself in your life and in your relationships and how you show up in the world. Now, essentially how this looks and how these parts of ourselves arise is over a timeline of our lives. So let's say that this is when you were born and this is when, where you're at right now, essentially, right? So there are these different parts of us that exist on this timeline, still within our psyche, locked in this period of time. So let's say that this orange circle up here, which is again one of these sub-personalities that you currently perceive as a part of yourself, was this moment from when you were around 5 years old. Maybe you were violently attacked at school by older kids and they bullied you. Maybe they pulled down your pants and exposed you in front of everyone, and everyone bullied you about being, maybe you had a small dick. I don't know. Obviously, you're 5 years old, so that wouldn't be unlikely. But maybe people bullied you for that, or bullied you for being different, right? A different nationality, or maybe a different personality trait. Maybe you were nerdy and wore glasses and had a gap in your teeth. Maybe you played video games and everyone else was sporty, whatever it may be. So you have this part of yourself that exists in this time frame of your life that is trapped in that period of time that still exists within your psyche. Or maybe you had another part, which was, around the age of, say, 10 years old, where you were emotionally abused by a parent. Similar to how I was, but I was a bit older than this. And, maybe you had alcoholic parents and they maybe physically abused you or emotionally abused you. And again, there is a part of you that is trapped in that part of your timeline of your life. Now, these parts of you that were in pain and that exist within the past in your mind are called exiles. Think of these, as some people refer them to as inner children. So these are the parts of you that are essentially younger parts of you that existed in the past that are trapped in a period of time that still feel like they're unsafe. They still feel like they're in that dangerous environment where they are being bullied and judged, where they were rejected by their parents, or maybe a period where you had to present something at school and you were publicly shamed and laughed at because you screwed up the presentation, you stuttered, and you went red, got embarrassed, and maybe walked off and cried. So you have these parts of you that are still trapped in your mind, existing in these time frames that are manifesting in the present moment. So certain triggers that are bringing you back to this frame of mind in the present moment are bringing you back to the psyche of that past version of yourself. So maybe in a romantic relationship, you have a disagreement with your partner and it triggers something that reminds you of how your parents used to treat you. For me, maybe it was, something made me feel like I was going to be rejected. And so that would make me essentially back away and protect myself. And I'll get into the protector parts in a moment, but essentially disconnect from the partner for fear that I was going to be rejected, for fear that I was going to be abandoned, and for fear that I wasn't lovable. And so this can manifest in a million different ways, right? Again, fear of social situations because of that time that you were standing on stage and got embarrassed. I have a situation in my life when I was about 16 years old and I was talking to a really attractive girl in my school, and I had crippling social anxiety at this point. And I remember I was trying to listen to what she was saying, and I kept just forgetting what we were talking about and getting super flustered and having to ask her, like, what were we just talking about? Sorry, I had a mental blank. That happened a couple of times before I ended up just walking out of the school, crying, walked all the way home, and I was furious at myself and ashamed of myself for not being able to communicate effectively with women. And that made me feel like I just wasn't good enough, I wasn't attractive. And in times in my future, if I, screw up how I'm communicating, it can bring me back to that period of time where I believe that I must not be good enough or that I'm dumb, and that I have these fears that essentially arise in my present psyche that affect how I'm speaking and presenting myself in that moment. I'm drawn back into that past version of myself. Now, the fallacy here is that we believe that these parts of ourselves are actually parts of us and they are integrated with who we are as a person. Now, Richard Schwartz refers to the higher level of you as the self. So the self is essentially the powerful version of yourself that exists above all of our different primal desires, our past traumas and struggles and emotions, our past pains. And it's a version of ourself that is clear, confident, compassionate, and understanding, and isn't judgmental, fearful, anxious, angry or aggressive or any of these traits. It's above that. It's like if you had a degree of consciousness that was, as some people refer to as the God consciousness, right? The higher level of mind, the higher level of consciousness, this would be it. And this is what at our core, we all are. We all are this higher level of consciousness, but our high level of consciousness is integrated with all of these subpersonalities, which causes us to act and speak and portray ourselves in certain ways because we get trapped in these lower levels of thinking and these reactionary states. Now, what we have to understand here is that we are not integrated with them. We are actually above them, okay? So let's just imagine that this right here is also the self, okay? And we're able to, with a higher level of mind, look down. And I don't mean look down as in like look down upon, but I mean like physically from a bird's eye view, look down on these subpersonalities and see them for what they are. And what we really need to do is actually help them feel safe and help them understand. And I know this sounds a bit woo. This was a bit woo when I learned it too, but you'll understand it as you get a bit further into this stuff. You have to learn to actually understand what these inner parts of you are experiencing, why they don't feel safe, and how you can best understand what their beliefs are. Because it's through that level of self-awareness and through understanding the awareness of these parts of yourself that are trapped in timelines in your past and why they're there, why they feel unsafe, and what they're trying to teach you, that you will be able to really overcome and unburden, as they refer to in internal family systems, unburden these parts from their burdens, from their limiting beliefs, from their negative thoughts, from their negative emotions, from their negative reactions, and from your emotional triggers, essentially, so that you can unburden these parts from their troubles and ultimately unburden yourself from these troubles too. So let's, again, say, for example, the moment where this person was abused by their parent. What you're really trying to understand is, why do you feel the way that you feel in the present? Like, why do you have these fears that you're not good enough? Oh, because of this moment in the past where I was rejected by a family member. And it's okay, what are you trying to teach me about this? What hasn't been heard from what you experienced at that period in your life? and you're really trying to understand what it is that's going through this psyche, the psyche of this subpersonality, so that you can understand exactly why they feel that way and help to unburden them from their troubles. Now, you will have, I guess, struggles with getting directly to the source because we have other parts of ourselves which are known as protectors. So imagine that this black circle here is a protector. And the protector is essentially a part of you that is essentially like the ego, right? The ego that protects you from these vulnerable parts of yourself within. So this part in here is the exile. This is the part of you that was initially hurt, the inner child part of you, if it was obviously a part of your childhood. It's just the vulnerable part of you who had past pain that it feels burdened and attached to, and it's trapped in that period of time. The protector is a part that is essentially protecting that part of you, which is why we have these emotional outlashes and outbursts when certain things trigger those parts of us, because we're trying to protect that part of ourselves, right? A lot of men struggle with this because we're told that vulnerability is weakness, and these parts of ourselves are inherently vulnerable, which is why you see a lot of like egotistical outlashes and outbursts, and in some cases violence from men in particular, because they have a lot of shame around the fact that they do have these vulnerable parts. So you have to actually be able to, you have to try and get past these protected parts and really get past the egotistical defenses that you have so that you can, again, get to the root core, which is that internal hurt part of you, that vulnerable exile, and start to understand what is it that you're going through. What is it that you want me to know, the high level of you, the self, so that you can unburden that part of you from its struggles by actually understanding what it's trying to communicate to you, and understand why it's struggling, and understand what happened in its past that it believes was so traumatic and so hurtful that you don't understand in the moment, at the present moment, and that it's really trying to communicate to you. Once you can truly understand these parts of yourself, and you can ultimately understand that this protector part of you is trying to serve the role of protecting this part of you, and that it doesn't need to serve that purpose because it is present, and in the present moment it is actually safe, because again, it feels unsafe because it feels like it's trapped in that part of the past. Once you're able to help it see that it's not living in that timeline anymore, things are different, the world has changed, your life has changed. Everything in your life is different compared to this part of yourself and the timeline that it was existing in. Once it can understand that things are different now versus then, and it can understand that it's no longer unsafe, and it can understand that you understand what it's gone through, what its beliefs are, why it's the way it is, and you can actually give it that compassion and that love to be like, hey man, I understand you, I'm here with you, I am here with you, and you can really see it as something that you're looking over and protecting, and not something that it feels it has to protect itself. Then you can unburden it, and you can ultimately get back to being more of this high level of self. You can unburden these parts one by one, help them overcome all of their struggles, help them understand that they are seen and understood, help them understand that they're not living in that timeline that they were living in, that they were struggling in. And as a result, you can overcome these subpersonalities, and you can unburden them and detach them from yourself. And the ultimate goal is to become more of this, to become more of the higher self, and detach these two timelines so that you can ultimately live in this state of confidence, clarity, compassion, purpose, integrity, and unburden yourself from the fears and anxieties that you have around your past insecurities and struggles. So hopefully that was helpful. I know that this is a very complicated concept to really understand. It's taking me time to understand deeply as well, but through teaching you guys, I can understand it deeper myself, and I'm sure that I'll make more videos on this in the future if you did find it valuable. Now, if you did find it valuable, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment, all that good stuff. I'm sure I'll leave some links in the description. I'll leave another video here as well, which I think will be valuable for you. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.